You've seen how to change the color and background color of the text on your page, but there's so much more that you can do with text in CSS. To start off, let's change the font. What's a font? You probably already know what one is, but you may not know the word for it. It's the style of the letters that make up the words, like whether the letters have flourishes on them or how thick they are, or if they look like they're written with an ink pen. Here, it'll be easier if I just go ahead and change the font family on this web page. I'll go to our PCSS rule that selects all the paragraphs and add a font family property here. Say font family sans-serif. Do you see how the letters changed? Notice they look a bit simpler now. Okay, now let me change the font family back by specifying serif instead. Notice the letters look a bit more complex. A serif font is any font that has what looks like little feet on the letters. When we tell the browser to use a serif font family, it will use the default serif font for the computer, which is usually the Times New Roman font. I'm not a big fan of that font though, so I'm going to change it back again to sans serif. The sans comes from Latin and means without, so a sans serif font is one that doesn't have those little feet on the letters. That's why the letters look simpler. When we tell the browser to use a sans serif font family, it uses the default sans serif for that computer, which is usually Arial or Helvetica. But here's an important point. It'll pick the default font of whatever computer the viewer is on, not the author. So we may very well be seeing two different sans serif fonts right now if your computer has a different default than mine. Sometimes I'm okay with that, but other times I'm picky, and I really want to make sure that whoever's viewing my web page sees it in exactly the same font as me. In that case, I can specify the precise font name, like Helvetica. This will work as long as both you and me have Helvetica on our computers. But not all computers have the same fonts, and in that case, the computer will just ignore the property entirely. Luckily, CSS lets us specify a fallback font family, a backup, in case a particular font doesn't exist on a computer. We just add a comma after Helvetica, and then bring back sans serif there. Now the computer will look for Helvetica, and if it can't find it, just use its default sans serif font. Generally, whenever you specify a specific font name, like Helvetica, you should always specify a backup family name as well. Besides serif and sans serif, there are a couple other generic font family names we can use. If we wanted our lyrics to look more handwritten, we could specify font family cursive. Nice. Or if we wanted the lyrics to be a bit fancier, we could try the fantasy font family. Or what if we wanted them to look like they were written on a typewriter? We could specify the monospace font family. A monospace font is fixed width, meaning that all of the letters take up the exact same width. And in fact, you've seen a lot of monospace fonts here on Khan Academy because we always use monospace fonts for code editors. That's because we want all of our code to line up, regardless of the letters in the words. Okay, now that you know how to change the font family, use your power wisely. If you want your page to look good, limit yourself to a few different families and come up with pairs of fonts that look good together. But hey, if you don't want your page to look good, then the world is your ugly oyster. Go forth and fontify. We can also use CSS to change the size of our text. As you can see by looking at the headings on this page compared to the paragraphs, the browser already provides default styles with different sizes for different elements. There's a body font size and bigger sizes for each level of heading. Sometimes we want to tweak those sizes though, and we can do that with the CSS font size property. For example, what if we want all of the text on our page to be just a little bit smaller? Well, we'll go to the style tag and we'll add a CSS rule for the body tag. And then inside that, put a font size property. Now, what should the value be for font size? How do we measure font size anyway? It's actually a really good question because there are at least 10 different units that CSS supports for font size. Let's start with a unit that you've seen before, pixels. We use pixels to decide how big to make images, and we'll keep using them a lot in CSS. Let's try 11 pixels. Ha! Everything got smaller. Even the headings got smaller, actually. Why did the headings get smaller too? Shouldn't they be whatever pixel size the browser set them to before? No, because the default browser style for headings isn't specified as a pixel. It's specified using a different unit called M, and that unit is a relative unit that makes the heading font size scale proportionally to the body font. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go to our H2 style rule and add the font size property. This time, instead of thinking in pixels, I'm going to think relatively. How much bigger relatively do we want H2s compared to body text? Maybe 2 times bigger? For that, we write 2M. What actually happened now is that the browser has calculated a pixel size for the font. The browser knows that the body font size is 11 pixels, and you told it that H2 should be 2 times bigger, so now all the H2s are 22 pixels high. If we change the body font size to 12 pixels, then how big will the H2s be? That's right, 24 pixels. What if we change the H2 font size to 1.5M? Now the H2 will be 12 times 1.5, 18 pixels high. We can also specify a pixel size for the H2 rule like we did for body, and it'd work the same way. It depends on what you find easier, and like I mentioned earlier, there are lots more units that we could use besides pixels and M. These are just two of the most popular units, but if you're hungry for more, check out the documentation for font size or search the internet for more tutorials. Let's see what else we can change about the font. What if we want this first paragraph to be bold? We could wrap the whole paragraph in a strong tag, but that would be kind of an abuse of the strong tag. We're not really trying to say that the whole first paragraph is a highlight. We just think it might look better bolded. So instead, we should use a CSS property, font weight. Let's go up to the relevant CSS rule and say font-weight: bold. Ta-da, it's bold. Now, what if we want to make all these lyrics italicized, slanted? Once again, we could wrap them all in an M tag because the browser always defaults to giving M italicized style. But we shouldn't do that because that's kind of an abuse of the M tag. We're not trying to emphasize the whole song. We just think it might look better italicized. So instead, we should use a CSS property, font style. Let's go up to our relevant rule, song lyrics, say font-style: italic. Okay, great. Notice that we have a bunch of font-related properties in one rule for our lyrics. We've got font family, font size, and font style. If we want, we can actually bundle them up into a single property, font. Just writing font italic, 13 pix, fantasy. Okay, and we can delete the 3 properties that we used to have, and everything looks the same. This is called a shorthand property since, as you can see, it's a lot shorter. But me, I don't like it because I always forget what order to write the properties in, and it's just easier if I write them out one at a time. So I'm going to bring back what I had before. It's up to you if you're a shorthander or a longhander. The important thing is to stay stylish.